Welcome to the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. Matt Zemek with Ethan Inman and Crash Lit Collier. I'm going to just start off with a note. Everyone knows I'm the bad cop around here. I'm the skeptic. I'm the pessimist. And I've been skeptical of Lincoln Riley the past few years. Just wondering if he's going to be able to get this thing over the hump. And as I've written at Trojans Wire, and Ethan's written about the Trojans. You want to read Ethan's work. You want to read my column on Sunday. I'm going to have more to say, of course. And of course, this week you want to read Trojans Wire for our Oregon coverage because it's a huge one, and it's a huge one because USC beat Iowa. But anyway, I've been skeptical, and I'm still skeptical about Saturday in Eugene. Okay, so it's not like I'm fully converted, fully convinced, but like, I went into this Iowa game skeptical of Lincoln Riley. And at halftime, I sure was hell skeptical of Lincoln Riley after that first half. Now, I can't be as skeptical. You have your viewpoints, you have your inclinations, but when the facts on the ground, when the reality that you see on the field changes, you have to be willing to see that change. Now, this thing hasn't fully turned around, but this was like a big, maybe not 180, but maybe 135-degree turn in the right direction. There's a lot about this Iowa game that was important. I know Ethan wrote about this Iowa game and how, casting aside Oregon, this Iowa game mattered a lot. And the way it all went down, this is some solid progression and growth, not just for this team, but for this football program. And part of what I wrote at Trojans Wire Sunday morning was, wow, it's been a while. It sure feels good, but it's been a while. It's been a while since we've had this important a win, and victory has felt this satisfying. Michigan was nice. Michigan kind of was the palate cleanser after the horrible Illinois game, but Michigan barely beat Purdue, barely beat Northwestern. Michigan's not great, okay? But Iowa, as Ethan wrote at Trojans Wire, this is an elite pass defense. This is a defense that held Oregon to 18 points. This is a defense that put Dante Moore in jail. And Mekhi Lemon and Jaden Mayava. We're going to talk about this, Ethan. I think it was more Mekhi Lemon being an absolute dude, being the Biletnikoff Award favorite. I'm going to put it out there. Sorry, Jeremiah Smith. But elite pass defense, Kirk Ferentz Iowa teams, they do not give up 14-point leads. Hadn't done it in 5 years, since 2020. When you do that, even the crusty skeptic, pessimist such as myself, I have to go, I was not familiar with your game. You have to have that change in mindset and outlook. This mattered a lot for 2026. What matters for 2025? Next Saturday. And again, we're disciplined here on the USC channel, the Voice of College Football. I know you want to talk about Oregon. I want to talk about Oregon. Ethan wants to talk about Oregon. Crash, you have relatives who follow Oregon. I know you want to talk about Oregon. That's Tuesday. Tonight, it's Iowa and the aftermath of a very, very important victory. So Ethan first, Crash second. Your big picture initial reactions. You have the floor for several minutes as we begin to process this win. And of course, so many follow-ups coming up over the course of our show. Ethan first.
Yeah, so absolutely. You brought up a great point, which was my article earlier this week at Trojans Wire that was sort of a preview or a prelude to this game, where I said, this game matters so much for the 2026 recruiting class. It matters so much for the construction of the 2026 roster. It matters so much for narratives. It matters so much for Lincoln Riley. I kind of laid it all out there. I've kind of been, for people who have followed the show, you'll remember that after the Illinois game, I was really angry. And then after the Notre Dame game, I was kind of like, it sucks, but it's not the end of the world. And there's actually ways that this could benefit USC. And so I feel like Oregon next week falls into a little bit of the latter category. Don't get me wrong. I'm raring to beat Oregon. I'm excited that I feel like this team has a chance to. I more than anybody want to see this team compete for college football playoff this year, not just next year. But I think that, that shouldn't discount how big this win is for this program, for this team's culture. Not only that they won, but the way that they won, because there's so many narratives about USC that were quieted. Like they're going
Not
into
tough
this
enough.
game. Yeah, not tough enough. I mean, losing probably 3 of your 4 best defensive players due to injury during the game and still winning, it's hard to argue with that. And then, the offense, people were so, especially people who don't follow USC, even people who do follow USC all week online, freaking out about the rain. Guys, this team plays better in the rain than teams that should play good in the rain. Like, I mean, we and they have experience with it. Like I wasn't worried about the rain too much myself, because I was a little worried after Iowa came out throwing the ball inexplicably. I was not expecting them to do that. But like for you from a USC offense perspective, like USC played fine at Purdue after, the thunderstorms there. And then they played in the rain at Notre Dame. And honestly, USC had its issues defensively, couldn't stop the run. USC couldn't establish the run on their side of the ball either. But Maava outplayed CJ Carr by a significant margin. And, were it not for Mekhi Lemon getting locked down the whole game by the Notre Dame defense, I think that they would have had a chance to go blow for blow with Notre Dame in that game. And, a couple drops from Jacoby Lane and others as well. So I don't think, and especially Ryan Sayeri's looked fine kicking in the elements. I didn't come into this game too worried about that, but, there were people who did, and they quieted that narrative. Lincoln Riley being able to come back, because a thing I've been talking about throughout the season, he's a great play caller when he has a lead. And, when things get tough, it gets a little shaky sometimes. Credit him. He stuck to his guns in a lot of ways. They kind of put the ball in Maava's hands and let him go out and win this one, which is what Lincoln Riley has done since making Maava the starter, for better and worse, and stuck to his guns there, and it worked. But, also they've developed a tough offense. They've developed a good offensive line. This is a Iowa defensive line that's probably the best they faced in weeks. It's not, maybe not the best they faced all season, but it's better than Nebraska's, and it's better than Northwestern's. It's, Notre Dame, that's debatable, but Iowa's a good defensive line, and they held up against them. Again, Elijah Page gets hurt and they still hold up. There's just so much depth. There's so much fight. And I think the bottom line is I'm proud to be a fan of and cover this team, which it's 2022. I was proud, up until the very end, and it was very exciting. But and I think that I will be proud, barring some disaster where we go and we lose to Oregon and then we go lay an egg against UCLA and then lose to an inferior bowl team. There is a truly disaster class scenario that could change my pride in this season. But realistically, I think that, me coming out of the season, even if we lose to Oregon next week, I'm still going to feel proud of what we accomplished, because it's just, it's the Iowa win, it's, and kind of the Nebraska win. And then also that Michigan win early in the season. Those were just so satisfying over, Big Ten fan bases who really don't like USC and are really just the antithesis of, everything that USC is not. They're supposed to be this tough programs who run the football, and we're going to put these soft West Coast boys in their place, and that's not what happened. And I think it's also significant that after both of those games, Lincoln Riley was really fired up, which I'm sure we'll talk about more during the show. But it's great to see that emotion out of him as well, and just see that competitiveness. So yeah, just there's such a sense of pride that is so refreshing that I'm sure many other USC fans are feeling, that we haven't really felt in a long time.
Absolutely. I think there was obviously a lot to be excited about, but also a lot at that game that definitely was disappointing, especially in the first half. It was really, once again, a tale of two halves sort of game, where just the first half, just nothing was going right. They just couldn't figure anything out. One thing that did stand out to me on the box score that I definitely just was double checking, but also, did note during the game, no interceptions from Jade Maava against arguably the toughest defense that USC has faced this year. So even for just as bad as that first half was, and I am just impressed that he didn't turn the ball over, that he was able to, be disciplined about his throws. And I think also part of that does, that credit does go to Mekhi Lemon. Like you said, he was just being an absolute dog, an absolute beast, Matt, and just really, playing like the Mekhi Lemon that we know, the one who is the best receiver in the country, the one that when he plays at his capabilities, like he can usually help bail out Mayava out of anything. So I was really just happy to see that offensively, just really see that. I also was impressed with just how they came out, even just with the weather. I know everyone was kind of concerned, especially, I guess, you could probably argue, like Ethan, you make the argument, they shouldn't be too concerned about the rain. They've been through it a couple times. Obviously, this is like the first rain game in the Coliseum. I can't recall the last one. I'm probably have to defer to you to that one, Matt. But I was talking with one of my friends before the game, and we were like, "Has it ever rained in the Coliseum since we've been students here?" And neither of us can recall. So, but I think it kind of the one place you could argue the rain did factor in was, at least at the start, was the fans, because a lot of fans were trying to desperately selling tickets at the last minute, like Friday night, Saturday morning, because they would rather just kick it on the couch and watch. But I think you just saw even the fans who did show up, like especially as the game got closer, they were still fired up. And I think there's no better evidence of that than that shirtless guy section. Yes, USC has caught on to that movement too. But then even after, but going back to the game, just after kind of the fans settled in and USC kind of regained their confidence, it's really impressive how the defense pulled it together and just really shut down the Iowa offense, which, like we talked about on Tuesday, Matt, they kind of run it a lot, and then they'll occasionally just throw the ball deep and just try to catch you off guard. And they kind of did that first, but USC kind of caught on to it, figured it out. And I really think Danton Lynn and the defensive players and staff made good adjustments at halftime. And really were able to then shut them down that second half and not allow any points. So really, I was just impressed with how USC responded just after that second half and just the adjustments they made in the locker room when they went back in, when they left the field.
Yeah, the reason why even a skeptic like me has to be impressed is that, just think of all the boxes that were checked and think of the differences from other USC moments this season. So let's start with Illinois. No Kamari Ramsey against Illinois. No Kamari Ramsey in this game. And you saw the evolution. You saw the improvement. Like now, they can function without Kamari Ramsey. Now, of course, you don't want him off the field, but guys stepped up. This was a resourceful defense. What you didn't see in Champaign against Illinois. So you can just see the progression. You can see the growth there. Another comparison, Nebraska. Dylan Raiola getting injured, that just looms over that game as a big what if. And we can all debate the severity, but it was an injury. Nebraska couldn't throw after the injury, and it affected the game to some degree. Here, you can't say an injury or any act of God, outside, helped USC. No, they just earned it. They climbed the mountain and they just owned Iowa, shutting them out. Second half, just play after play after play, possession after possession. And by the way, Iowa was a 6.5 point underdog. So people were thinking, oh, my Iowa plus 6.5 tickets easily going to cash. And USC was so dominant in that second half that you thought, USC might win this game by 8 or 12. Roast those Iowa plus 6.5 tickets. So on so many levels, in so many ways, USC came back against Nebraska, came back against Northwestern, but this comeback, this second half performance, obviously in a higher league, a much bigger weight class. And of course, as we just compare this to Oregon, USC beat Iowa much more decisively than Oregon did. Oregon needed a last play field goal. Oregon was trailing. If an Iowa corner just turns his head 45 degrees to knock down a Dante Moore pass, Oregon might have 2 losses right now, and Iowa would still be part of the college football playoff conversation, maybe. But anyway, USC and Oregon both played Iowa. USC looked better. Not all the time, but it did look better. So you can just compare this to previous points in USC's season. You can compare this to other teams that have had similar experiences to USC, and you put them all in a blender. You realize that USC looks better comparatively on so many levels. Another point, I mentioned after the Nebraska game, Jaden Maiava was regressing, that the quality of competition was the reason why, the really lofty numbers in September came down in October. Well, no regression here. And if anything, this is progression, that Maiava stepped it up several levels. Crash made the very important point. He didn't, fall through that trap door in the second half, didn't throw that killer interception. So quality defense, quality competition, and Jaden Maiava elevates his game. So just on so many levels, you just go through your notebook, you go through your mental index, however you want to sort this. USC has progressed. USC has developed. USC has grown. And I haven't been saying it all season because, again, I've been skeptical, but there's just so much evidence of growth now that you just have to say, maybe this thing really is getting better. So as we continue the conversation, let's go to Jaden Maiava. And Ethan, you wrote at Trojans Wire, you think Jaden Maiava staked his case as the best quarterback in the country. So that means he should get an invitation to the Downtown Athletic Club in New York in December. Talk a little bit more about what you saw from Jaden Maiava, and let's just deal with that. He really is better than Mendoza. He really is better than Julian Sayin. Best quarterback in the country. Make the case, Ethan Inman.
So I want to preface this by saying I'm not predicting that Maiava will get an invite to New York. I'm not predicting he will win the Heisman. I think he probably won't because team success matters. I think that the Fernando Mendoza narrative is just so good and so rich that it's going to be hard, barring a 5-touchdown, 400-yard performance at Oregon next week. It's going to be hard for him. And, I don't even know if USC fans should want that to happen because, we should want a nice balanced team win where we establish the run and Maiava doesn't have to throw so much. But barring a performance like that, I don't think Maiava's winning the trophy. I don't even know if necessarily he should because, I do think team success should matter for this award. And it kind of has gone by the wayside a little bit in recent years. So I'd like to kind of see that return a little bit to the Heisman calculus. But I just think, and I think this is also somewhat about the quarterbacks around him. I just don't think that this year there's been very many standouts. There's been a lot of big name guys who have really disappointed. Arch Manning is a guy who comes to mind. Carson Beck has had some really, really horrible games. So a lot of guys like that have just, kind of really been disappointing. But I just think that considering everything that USC has had to deal with this year, and just watching Maiava week in and week out, his worst game was undoubtedly Nebraska. Every other game, I feel like he's had a good game. There have been some disappointments from other quarterbacks, Fernando Mendoza had a worse game than Maiava did against Iowa. And he also, didn't play that great against Penn State. So I just think that when I watch Maiava, I see more talent. And I'm not saying he's more polished. I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying he should win the Heisman Trophy. But I just think that, he displayed so much talent in a situation this weekend that should have been working against him in every way. This is a legit top 5 in the country pass defense. And we also saw how he performed against Nebraska, which was honestly a less proven pass defense than Iowa. I believe Nebraska is slightly ahead of Iowa statistically, probably especially after this game and how well Maiava played in all the passing statistical categories. But Maiava is probably the only good quarterback that Nebraska's really played this year. Whereas Iowa's taken on Mendoza. They've played Dante Moore. Now they've played Maiava. They also played Rocco Becht at Iowa State. So, this is a defense that's gone blow for blow with some of the best quarterbacks in the country and have held them all to, performances that are subpar. Whereas, Maiava, like we said, went out there and didn't make any mistakes. Was also dealing with the rain and was just making such nice, tight throws into tight windows. There were a couple that, his receivers really helped him out on. There's that one just incredible leaping catch by Mekhi Lemon that every time I watched it, I'm just how in the world did he make this catch? There was, one or two from Jacoby Lane that were like that as well. But still, he put his playmakers in position to make plays, and that's what you want from your quarterback. And he obviously has the legs. Some of these quarterbacks that are in the conversation for best quarterbacks in the country don't have the same talent with the legs that Maeva does. Maeva still doesn't use it, as much to be considered a true dual threat, but he's got a lot of talent there as well. I just think he's the most talented. Like I said, I don't think he's necessarily earned the Heisman based on team performance. Stuffing the stat categories also really matters for winning the Heisman, and I don't, necessarily feel like he's done that compared to guys like Sain and Mendoza, who have a lot of touchdowns and less interceptions. But I don't know. I don't think that he should be discounted for that. I don't think that, because his team is good at running the football and because, he's an unselfish guy and, he doesn't stuff the stat sheet as much against inferior opponents, that we should discount him. And so I just think it's about the eye test. And I think that Maeva really passes that. And there's just not a guy who I've seen play football this year, and I've watched a decent amount of it, that I've really felt like is better than him. And he's really outdueled a lot of the other quarterbacks he's played. USC hasn't played a lot of great quarterbacks, and then, like I said, just in the eye test. So, he's got a great opportunity to go and prove it against Oregon this weekend, because they're the best pass defense in the country. He's played 2 of the top 5 now in Nebraska when he didn't have a good game, and now Iowa. Oregon's the best pass defense in the country, and he has to play them on the road. So that's going to be the real measure of how good Jaden Maeva is. But I just feel like, as USC fans, we should really appreciate what we're seeing and give him a lot of credit, because he's real talented. And, we have some great receivers, but he also went out there and made some great throws on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, sorry. But yeah, Ethan, I think, definitely you make a lot of interesting points, but definitely it is interesting to see the years when you talk about the Heisman race, what years sometimes they do look at team success versus individual success. I mean, you can kind of look at, really, I think the best case study of it is looking at 2022 and 2023 with the Heisman. You look at Caleb Williams leading USC almost all the way to the college football playoff until he pulls his hammy. And then obviously the Trojans lose the Pac-12 championship game and aren't able to even have a shot at contending for the Natty that year. But Williams still, you look at his individual stats combined with the team success, and he's the Heisman winner, which I think he absolutely deserved. I don't think there's really any doubt in that one. I haven't followed the Heisman races too closely. I know there've been some controversial ones. That one didn't really seem like there was much controversy in it. 2023, however, a lot more controversy, because you got guys like Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., who had these led their teams to great seasons. Nix's season being kind of like Williams, where just fell short in the Pac-12 championship, don't get to advance to CFP, and Penix advancing his team all the way to the national championship game. And who wins it? Jaden Daniels. And I'm not trying to knock on Jaden Daniels. He's clearly doing great in the NFL, had a great last year at LSU. But kind of the thing that it seems like they went with there was more the individual stats. But I kind of agree. I feel like it's more like they kind of say it's more generally been a team award. And then even 2024 last year, that was kind of an interesting one. Although it was I know people are saying, oh, should Ashton Jeanty have gotten it for what he did with Boise State, or Dylan Gabriel with Oregon, or they end up going with Travis Hunter. But then again, I feel like the Hunter one's a little interesting, kind of unique, just because you don't see too many two-way players. So I can see why Travis Hunter won it last year. I'm not saying it, but I mean, I'm not sure how I felt about it. I kind of was torn between those 3 guys, but really I kind of think of sometimes you see it more the individual stats versus the team. So I do get what you're saying. Maeva should win it, kind of based on how he's kind of, statistically doing. And I mean, there is a case, especially if USC can, win out, and then if by all luck, which would probably mean Indiana has to lose, which would then actually in that way help Maeva, they get to advance and play in the Big Ten championship game. That could possibly help. But it kind of seems like, kind of with how Indiana's doing, that probably right now, it kind of seems like the lean is kind of going more towards team success versus over individual stats. So, yeah, I see kind of why Mendoza would probably get it in that regard. But definitely an interesting argument to think about, kind of which way the voters lean, kind of what kind of is the media feeding at people too, I think is a big factor as well in it. Because obviously, kind of the SEC and LSU in particular did not shut up about Jaden Daniels, even as just, the defense that year for LSU was awful.
For the record, just real quick, I was an Ashton Genty guy. I think he was robbed.
Fair enough. I can see why, certainly.
And I think Crash's point about the media, huge point, because let's just talk Heisman for a few minutes. We can afford to do that. We'll get back to USC Iowa in a bit, but like we've glided into the Heisman lane. It's mid-November. Why not give you like 5 or 6 minutes of Heisman talk? The media's presence is so important because consider this, just with last year, Travis Hunter. If he's playing for an anonymous coach named John Sanders, he's not winning it. He was playing for Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, clicks. The guy 60 Minutes interviewed twice. and he won a few games. He didn't win a national championship. He didn't even win a conference championship. And 60 Minutes interviewed him twice. So like that's just the media overload. If Travis Hunter's playing for New Mexico and not Colorado, if he's in Albuquerque and not in Boulder, he ain't winning that. All right. So media angle there. Other thing in terms of the Heisman, Crash's point again, really well made, that it's about team success. It's like basically the starting quarterback on a top 4 team, a team that's playing in the playoff semifinals, the national championship game. Some infamous examples from the past. Gino Torretta, 1992. He was a game manager, and yet he beat out a guy named Marshall Faulk of San Diego State. Faulk, the empirically better player, but Gino Torretta was in the national championship game. Miami played Alabama in the 1993 Sugar Bowl. Eric Crouch, Nebraska. Again, a game manager, a great leader, a great teammate, like a guy you want in the foxhole. But Rex Grossman was playing at a higher level all season long. But Crouch and Nebraska were in the national championship game, that 2002 Rose Bowl, Miami versus Nebraska. So Crouch got the nod. We've seen it very consistently that the quarterback on a top 4 team gets the nod over players from smaller schools or schools that aren't in the playoff picture. That's why I really liked Robert Griffin in 2011. Baylor wasn't in any championship game, but just Robert RG3's excellence that season was higher than Andrew Luck. And Andrew Luck was really good. And this gets to a point about the Heisman. We nitpick. Does this guy deserve the Heisman? Does that guy deserve the Heisman? Well, this guy did more and that guy did less. It doesn't mean you're a bum if I think you don't deserve the Heisman. It means you're the 4th best player in the whole country, not the 1st. Like that's how this goes. You have to differentiate between the most outstanding player in college football, which is what the Heisman is supposedly supposed to be awarded to, from the 4th best, the 5th best, the 6th best. And so what kills me about this year's Heisman discussion is that Fernando Mendoza, really good player. Julian Sayin, really good player. But they're not the best players on their teams.
No.
Right? Julian Sayin is not the best player on the Ohio State roster. Like Caleb Downs might be. They have some fire-breathing defensive linemen who are just man-eaters as well. It's similar with Indiana. Like Indiana's best position group is defensive line. Okay? So you can't be the most outstanding player in college football if you aren't even the most outstanding player on your own team. And so, there are lots of great flavors of college football quarterbacks. And Fernando Mendoza in particular, also Julian Sayin, like they're leaders. They're responsible. They make clutch plays. They do what their coaches tell them to do. You want them as teammates. They're wonderful football players, but they're not the true Heisman heavyweights like Charlie Ward, 1993, Florida State. Danny Werfel, 1996, Florida. Like the heavyweights, the guys who just threw it down, who'd hang 50 on opponents week after week. Like, those are quarterbacks who were the best players in the whole sport. These guys aren't in the same league. And again, it feels like a diss. It feels like being a hater. But Fernando Mendoza is not winning games 48-45. He's not winning these epic shootouts the way Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray did for Oklahoma. Like Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray under Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, they were the reasons Oklahoma was winning conference championships, going to the playoff. They were the best players on their team. You take Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray out of those Oklahoma teams, they're dog poop because they had Alex Grinch coaching defense and they gave up 40, 45 points a game. All right. So those were quarterbacks who carried their teams, quarterbacks with a cape, big S on the chest, from the past, whether it was Lincoln Riley, whether it's Steve Spurrier in Florida, back in the day, Bobby Bowden. Like, I remember what heavyweight quarterbacks look like. And this year, what you're seeing is, Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza, like their completion percentages are around 90.
Yeah.
But like they're throwing safe 7-yard passes, and then a really fast dude takes the ball 20, 25 yards down the field. Like this is basically like saying, Shohei Ohtani should win the Cy Young because he's throwing against there's no batter in the batter's box. Okay. And you just get to throw strikes without any hitter there. Like, just that's kind of what Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza are doing. They're throwing pitches with no hitter there. Like they're throwing dump offs, or maybe slightly more than dump offs. So of course their completion percentage is going to be through the roof. But when have you seen Sayin throw an amazing pass? And usually, when Indiana beat Penn State, Indiana receivers made the amazing catch. It wasn't so much that Mendoza made an incredible throw. It was that the receiver made an amazing play on the ball. So all of this context, these details, like this is what's supposed to inform a Heisman discussion. And so it just slays me that these good but hardly great quarterbacks are being elevated and being presented as the best players in college football. Give me Jeremiah Love of Notre Dame over any of those quarterbacks. Okay, that guy's a dude. All right, and he is the engine of that Notre Dame offense with C.J. Carr sputtering. And on defense, Jacob Rodriguez of Texas Tech, like he's just devouring people left and right. He's having everybody for breakfast. Like that to me looks like a guy who I could say is the best college football player in the whole country. So Ethan and Crash, I think that we've gone so far down that rabbit hole of saying, well, if you're a starting quarterback and your team's 11-0 in late November, well, you must be the Heisman. I would also add, before I throw it to you for your takes, Mendoza threw a key interception at Iowa, bounced back from it. Threw a key interception against Oregon, bounced back from it. Threw a key interception against Penn State, bounced back from it. You don't get a Heisman just because you make winning plays after you threw interceptions that put your team in danger of losing. That's not how it works. So Ethan, Crash, like, are you as upset about this year's Heisman conversation as I am? Because I think we've lost our standards.
I think, I mentioned a second ago that Ashton Jeanty was robbed. I think I probably haven't gotten into it as much this year, or haven't cared about it as much, because I was so irked when Ashton Jeanty lost last year that I just kind of gave up on caring or paying attention this year, because, and also I'm just so focused on USC and USC winning football games that the Heisman, race could matter less to me compared to, us beating Iowa or us going into Oregon next week. But I agree with everything you're saying here. I mean, it's not even that they're not the best player. I'd be okay with them winning if they're not the best player, if they were the most valuable player on their team. The reason why I think Jaden Maiava deserves consideration as one of the best quarterbacks in college football is because I would still argue, even though there are plenty of valuable players on the USC team, including the receivers, I would argue he's the most valuable player on the USC football team. And he's one of the few quarterbacks who has the numbers. He has the second most yards in the Big Ten, and he has the most yards of any quarterback whose team is in the college football playoff contention. So he has the numbers, and he's the most valuable player on this USC football team. And you could argue like, oh, but USC just has so much great talent around him that they'd be good anyway, even if he wasn't there. We saw what a USC team with this much talent, USC offense with this much talent, and a so-so quarterback was last year when Miller Moss was the quarterback. Like, Mekhi Lemon was on that team. Jacoby Lane was on that team. Woody Marks was on that team. Quentin Joyner was on that team. Like, Quentin Joyner would, if he was on the USC roster right now, he'd be starting over King Miller, if he was healthy. Quentin Joyner's hurt, and, we obviously wish him the best in his recovery. But, like, that offense had a lot of talent. And, the offensive line was not doing great. And, they didn't make a lot of adjustments. They made Miller Moss make way too many pocket passes and yada, yada, yada. We can relitigate that later. But if Miller Moss was on this year's team, I still think that this USC offense would be limited. And, Mayavas just brings so much value. He keeps the defense honest when they're defending the run, because he can take, and he started to do that more recently too. He can take off and run the football himself, pull the ball out of the running back's stomach and kind of take it himself. He, just has so much arm talent, way more arm talent than Miller Moss, obviously. Makes those throws in the tight windows, also makes the long ones. Like, he gets the ball into the playmaker's hands, and it's not just on short, like, check down throws. It's on, these long, incredible throws on the run. He made a really nice throw on the run on Saturday to Jacoby Lane. So, like, I don't know. Like, I think that without Julian Sain and without Fernando Mendoza, Indiana and Ohio State would still be college football playoff contenders. Where would USC be without Jaden Mayava? I don't know. But I don't think we're having nearly the same success this season. And I think out of all the players on this team, taking him away, it would be the biggest blow to anybody else. And part of that's just the nature of the quarterback position. And again, like, if there's kind of two different camps of the Heisman conversation. I am okay with the most valuable player winning over the best player. I grew up watching, Tim Tebow. And Tim Tebow, like, there's no, especially in hindsight, like, you can't say that Tim Tebow was the best player in college, like the best quarterback, definitely in college football. Like, he went on to have the NFL career that he had. But he was just so valuable to that team, and he was such a leader. And, he overcame his limitations throwing the football to still win football games. So, like, I'm okay with that camp of argument, as long as you have that camp of argument to give the award to someone over, being the best player. And I think that that's the issue that I see. And it sounds like you're saying as well, Matt, like, they're not the best player, but they're also not even the most valuable player on their own team. Like, there's just so much, like, especially on both of those defenses, there's so many players that I would chalk up having more value. And I think that those teams, like I said, are still CFP contenders without their quarterbacks.
Ethan, I think you made a lot of great points. And now, obviously, I think there is something to be said about, stats got to matter. And I mean, Matt, you did bring up the example of Marshall Faulk. I'm only coming back to it briefly because my dad went to San Diego State. So he's a little bummed about that one. And, like, I grew up a bit of a San Diego State fan. I think my first ever college football jersey did happen to be a Marshall Faulk jersey. I was at the old Snapdragon when they retired 28. So I do have some memories cheering for the Aztecs as a kid, but don't worry, it's always fight on from here on out. Just got to make that clear. But back to the present day, I think the stats got to matter, but I think also winning needs to matter too. So part of why I was upset with the Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman wasn't because of his talent. It's because, yeah, sure, he's clearly this talented player, but also they didn't even make the SEC championship that year. So whereas Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. led their teams to the Pac-12 championship, and basically whoever got in was pretty much guaranteed in the CFP and was probably had a shot at winning a national championship. So I think for that, I look at just what did you do overall to contribute to just, you obviously had to be a super valuable and important player. I get that. Most valuable or best player. I'm all for that. But also, what did you do in terms of leading your teams to, like, significant wins while putting up impressive statistics? And then obviously, your example of Fernando Mendoza kind of, messing up and rescuing the team, then messing up. Like, obviously, like, if someone's doing that, like, I'm all for, like, oh, you have way too many picks, you're out in my book. I don't want to see all this. I'm not giving you my Heisman note if you're staving yourself pretty much. You're not. So I think it's just really, you got to look at it as, how are you mattering? Just how do you look on the stat sheet? But then also, how do you look just in getting your team wins? So I think really I look at kind of the whole picture. So I like to see guys who are more like helping their team get wins while also putting up impressive numbers. So that's why I really was kind of like, I thought Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. should have won the 2023 Heisman. Like, that's the one I'm kind of most upset. And I'm wondering now, is the Heisman starting to become corrupt? Is it starting to become like some of those music awards? Like, I'm convinced the Grammys are corrupt now. Like, just with how some of those selections are. I'm just wondering, are we reaching a point of where it's kind of corrupted, especially with how the media can kind of dictate, maybe not in the same way as like the Grammys, for example, but like the media can kind of, impose, like, talk about who it wants to talk about, like the Travis Hunter thing, like the Colorado story. I mean, it's definitely an interesting thing, especially with, you got someone like Dion who loves to talk, you can't watch college football without seeing him at least once a commercial break. So I think you just have to look at kind of just try to be able to throw out the stories, kind of do like, you really got to be able to just look at like, just stop, really just be like, all right, what does this guy actually do? I think is really how Heisman voters should be looking at, not just as in like, oh, this guy looks great. Oh, like teams that talk about him always put up this number. Oh, they got all these wins, but he's not doing anything. It needs to come down to everything. And you just got to like actually really just be able to tune out the media and really just actually like look at what the guy actually does. That's how I think. That's what I'd really like to see from the Heisman voters this year.
Yeah, I'll just add one more note. Like, the best player in the sport can be on defense, and yet the Heisman Trophy winner is practically never on defense. I know Ethan, he follows Nebraska as well as USC. Ndamukong Suh, 2009. He came across as the best player in college football to me that season. And for old timers, people who watched USC's glory days in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Hugh Green of Pittsburgh in 1980. He lost to George Rogers of South Carolina, but Pittsburgh smothered South Carolina in that 1980 Gator Bowl. I think Hugh Green was the best player in college football in 1980. And I know that Mark Rogers of the Voice of College Football would have an opinion or two on that. All right, speaking of awards, but moving back to USC Iowa and the state of this team, got to talk about Mekhi Lemon. So he's not going to win the Heisman, but he could win the Biletnikoff after that display. Very simply, Ethan, Crash, that's the best game by a wide receiver that I have seen in college football in 2020-25. I can't think of anything particularly close either. I mean, it wasn't just the acrobatic plays. They were clutch plays. They were important plays. And like, he wasn't doing this, just by himself. Like, he was fending off defenders as well. So like, he had to position his body right, and he was still coming up with, these Cirque du Soleil displays. Just an absolute home wrecker performance from one man on one day in one game. And it was rainy conditions. So like, you had a wet ball too. Like, there's nothing that Mekhi Lemon didn't do. This was some really king-size stuff in the Coliseum. Ethan first, Crash second.
Yeah, so I think it's really important in this discussion of Mekhi Lemon to point out what Kirk Ferentz said about him after the game. He said, Mekhi Lemon is as good as I've seen. I mean, going back 20-plus years, I don't know if anybody has impacted the game more. I can think of one other guy maybe, but Mekhi Lemon is a really outstanding player. So he gave him like the highest possible praise. Basically said he's one of the best college football players he's ever seen. And, Kirk Ferentz has been around a real long time. So, his defense have locked down a lot of great football players. So for him to go out and say that, it's really high praise. And then also after the game, Jacoby Lane tweeted out that he also believes that Mekhi Lemon is the best wide receiver in college football. A little bit of bias there, obviously, but it was still a fun tweet to see him make on social media. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, and it also like individually for Mekhi Lemon, and it was partially like this for Jaden Mayava too, but we talked about like Lincoln Riley and USC silencing narratives. Like, this was a real narrative silencing game for Mekhi Lemon. If you have been following USC and you watched the Notre Dame game where he got locked up by Leonard Moore. Like, I wasn't shy about saying it. I said that he and Jacoby Lane needed to step up in future games. I thought they had a couple of key drops, especially in the rain and dealing with the slippery ball. So that, I And I was a little disappointed. I wanted to see a little bit more out of him because, what I'd seen to that point was him just dominating. The week before he had dominated Michigan and made that great catch in the end zone. And, that ended up going viral. So I was hoping for, he's a college kid and he's obviously still growing a lot in his career. And so it's not, necessarily that I'm expecting him to be perfect, but I just had a lot of hope. And, I think that, again, just a real narrative silencing win like this. Again, he was going against one of the best defenses in the country with one of the most experienced defensive coaches who also now has tape of 2 games where he played poorly. Not poorly, but, was kind of somewhat limited, like that being the Notre Dame game and also the Nebraska game where he wasn't really effective either. Like there's kind of a blueprint out there for how to shut him down. And he just really elevated himself, went out there and just put on such a rock star performance, such an exciting performance. Like anytime the ball is thrown in his direction, you're just excited about what could happen. It's a bit like watching Steph Curry on the basketball court. Just man, so cool to see and so exciting. And he really, like I said, silenced some of the narratives because, he stepped up in USC's biggest game of the season in conditions that he had struggled in before, which is against one of the, a better secondary in the rain. Just went out and silenced everybody. So really great to see from him.
Absolutely. And I think I want to go back, Ethan, I like that you brought up what Kirk Ferentz said about him after the game. And you got to consider, he's saying that after a guy just beat up on a Kirk Ferentz Iowa defense too. Factor that in there. Like Kirk, you got to think that's really high praise from a guy who's built his reputation on on doing defense. Like that's Kirk Ferentz is like, that's his brand is defense. So I think when you look at that and then just how Mekhi Lemon played combined with how he, kind of struggled in kind of USC's 2 kind of more like upper tier, top tier type games in Notre Dame and Nebraska, I think it just shows just how impressive he is, how much he's really developed over his 3 years in college, and how I think he's just such an impressive player. He's really fun. He's fast. He obviously, when he gets the ball, he's super hard to defend too. And there's just been so many plays. It's just so fun to just watch him out there. And I mean, obviously it's definitely a bummer, but just think about just how much more hype there'd be if, the trick play from Illinois hadn't been wiped out, just how impressive that one was. Just everything the guy does, as soon as he touches the ball, it's like, he's like Sonic the Hedgehog. You're not catching him. It's just impossible to bring him down, impossible to tackle him. Just once he gets that ball, he's off. Like usually, once he breaks through there, it's over. Like don't even burn the energy running after him, but it's just really fun to watch him. So I really hope I think he's honestly one of the best receivers in the country and has just continued to grow and develop and really been a key part of this team. Even going back briefly to our Heisman argument, if, other positions were considered, you could maybe make the case that maybe he deserves it more than Mayava for what he's done and the times he does put this team on his back. But so for those reasons, I'm just really, but just for even just getting the Biletnikoff, like just that alone just shows just how great he's been, how well he's developed, and just how great of an offense that USC runs under with him in the system.
All right, folks, plenty more on USC football and the game against Iowa, the state of the program. Oregon is Tuesday at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, but tonight we focus on Iowa and the aftermath of that game. More on the other side, but first, here's a word from our sponsor. We'll see you in a minute.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And you can catch Mark Rogers and the voice of college football 6 nights a week, Mondays through Saturdays, 10 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in the West. How can you support the USC channel as the Trojans are 8-2 going into the Oregon week? We're giving you the content you crave. You want to support us? You want to support myself, Ethan, and Crash? Go to vocfb.com/shop. Get one of those snappy VOCFB caps. Ethan has that camo model. You get the USC branded cap. That goes directly to the channel. Proceeds help us out here on the USC channel, the voice of college football. There are shirts, tumblers, mugs, other forms of merch. Just play around, look around at vocfb.com/shop. And then the other way that you can help our channel here at the voice of college football, you go to our YouTube homepage, USC at the voice of college football. So you go to the homepage, you go to that join button right in the middle of the screen next to the subscribe button. Okay, and you get that pop-up middle Heisman tier, top national champion tier. You get exclusive insider access to bonus cuts, those exclusive insider segments that Ethan, Crash, and myself have been producing. So get out your fork and knife, all right, and tuck in to those bonus cuts. And of course, to our members, and we had a social studies guy join us as a member. Thank you for being a member. If you are a member and you watch these bonus cuts, share with your friends. Tell other people to become a member of the USC channel at the middle Heisman tier, the top national champion tier. You can support Ethan, Crash, and myself here at the voice of college football. All right, so the conversation continues at USC. And so we went into Maava, we went into Mekhi Lemon. Now let's turn to the defense. And so it's just a really interesting dynamic about USC's defense. First 20 minutes of a game hits the snooze bar. But then midway through the second quarter, they wake up, they get back into it. So first 20 minutes are bad, but hey, at least they don't stay down, unlike the Illinois game. They're beginning to get it and halftime adjustments. And this is a huge difference that D'Anton Lynn is definitely bringing to USC relative to his predecessor. Let's just put it that way, not say the name. Halftime adjustments, third quarters, they're on point. This was such a problem under Clay Helton and such a problem under the other guy who is defensive coordinator. So at halftime, things get fixed. Now, obviously, there's the limitation of, the first 20 minutes, need to find a way to be good right out of the tunnel. But that's more of an Oregon conversation in terms of just looking at Iowa. Ethan first, Crash second. What do you think changed? And this is a two-parter. What do you think changed midway through the second quarter and especially in the second half when USC began to put the clamps down? And on a related note, no Kamari Ramsey, no Bishop Fitzgerald. Who, in your estimation, do you really look at as someone who really nailed things down and kept this defense together for USC? Ethan first.
Okay, so I think part of the reason why it was such a slow start, looking back at it now, at the time I didn't feel like this because I was just so frustrated. But now looking back, I really think Iowa just came out with a really great game plan that USC was not expecting whatsoever. The last thing I expected was Mark Gronowski to come out firing in the rain. I was sitting there stunned on my couch. I was like, what? I mean, it was smart because USC secondary has obviously been the weakness of their defense generally throughout most of the season. It's improved a lot in recent weeks, and they've learned how to play against, inferior quarterbacks, obviously. But I was just not what I was expecting. Kirk Ferentz is just so, he sticks to his guns so much more than any other coach maybe in the entire country. I was they're going to run and try to run us down. Because it wasn't like Iowa wasn't running the football either. They averaged 5.5 yards a carry in this game. It wasn't super consistent, and USC did a good job at getting off the field at critical moments and stuff like that. But it was just entirely unexpected. So I think that caught them a little off guard. Mark Gronowski obviously has some talent. His stats are the worst of any quarterback that starts in the Big Ten. but it's not that he's not a talented guy. I like the way that he plays football. I thought he had a good first half, throwing a touchdown, rushing for a touchdown, and receiving a touchdown. That's hard to do. That's, he's kind of a little Swiss Army knife there. When he runs the football, he's real physical about it too. Like, he really fights for extra yards. There's not many quarterbacks in the league that do that. And I think, he has more arm talent than the stat sheet says. He just, there were in the second half, I think, after, things got a little bit more stressful, he made a couple of bad throws. And especially in the wet conditions, he's no Jaden Maiava, basically. And I think that Iowa fans today are wishing they had someone like Jaden Maiava on their team. But yeah, I do think that the game plan caught them off guard a little bit. I also think that there's just something about this team that when they get settled in, I don't know if it's that, like, playing against certain receivers for a few minutes. Like, I brought this up last week, like, playing against certain receivers, the different offensive linemen, like, because it's not like every team that's a run first team runs the exact same run concepts. And it's also not like watching film means that, like, and like visualizing what you're going to do against that offense means that, like, you're going to do that. You can, like, do that physically in the games. And I think also, like, every football game is different. Like, a team can look, and as Iowa showed in this game, like, a team can look a certain way on every game in the film and just come out with a completely different game plan than you were expecting. So yeah, I think it's partially the youth. Like, they just need a little bit more time to adjust and to get going and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, credit them for doing that. I think if I want to shout out one player, somebody said it right at the start of the show. Kennedy Urlacher played really well in coming in for Kamari Ramsey at that nickel position. And that's a really significant narrative, because when Kamari Ramsey came out against Illinois, they put in Kevin Longstreet and not Kennedy Urlacher. And similarly to Kennedy Urlacher, like, Kevin Longstreet made a couple of nice plays, but they were also really picking on him. Like, the only reason he made a couple of nice plays was because they were really just going after him. And he ended up giving up a touchdown in that game. And so it was really inconsistent and really shaky. And he looked like a young player. But Kennedy Urlacher came in and he wasn't perfect, but he made really key plays. And especially, this is really important, at really key moments. Like, he was the one who shoved the Iowa receiver out of bounds at the end of the game on that crucial throw that Gronowski threw on fourth down that ended up getting called out of bounds, where he put his toe down just on the sideline there, that Iowa receiver. That was Kennedy Urlacher who made that very smart play. Obviously also made a first down saving tackle earlier in the game. So he's got the right mentality. He's just a fun player to watch. And it seems like, when the moment calls for it, he really goes all out and makes a big play. So I'm excited to see how his career continues to develop, because it feels like we haven't really seen him on the field all that much this year. He's really only played in special teams. So seeing him get some extended playing time and making an impact for USC was really cool. So I'll shout him out, and I'm sure there's other players that you guys will talk about, but he's just the guy who I wanted to highlight, especially because people talked about him earlier in the chat.
For sure. I think what stuck out to me about just how Iowa opened the game offensively, and we talked about it, Matt, on Tuesday, was we were kind of like, and we mentioned earlier in the show, like, I was going to run the ball a bunch, then maybe once while I'll just throw it deep and try to catch a team off guard. I don't want to speak for you, but I did not expect that to happen within like the first 5 plays of the game. Like, that was, I think, where I got caught off guard was, wait, they're throwing it already? And then not to mention, they kind of got a little creative with their offensive play call, and especially with Gronowski throwing a touchdown, rushing a touchdown, then also catching a touchdown too. Like, not expecting that, but then also just showed, like, wait, like, if this is how USC is getting beat on defense, like, it did not look great, especially going into halftime, but then they just turned it around. And I think they're just obviously, really, I was just impressed with just the whole defense collectively, just especially at the line and the linemen and the linebackers on the defense, just really just making things a lot tougher for the Hawkeyes and just putting some pressure on them in general. So it's not so much, it's more just those position groups I want to shout out, not so much any individual players, just because it was really like it's total team effort there, especially when just how kind of this team was kind of initially looked like they were sort of like completely out of their depth, kind of like going like proven looking like they maybe didn't even look like they could handle an offensive Iowa's caliber. And then the fact that they were able to just kind of flip a switch, make some of those halftime adjustments. Certainly, obviously, it's not to say, like you said, Ethan, I think obviously Kennedy Urlacher coming in for Kamari Ramsey was certainly huge, especially when you just look at how critical Ramsey's been, just as kind of the guy who knows how Danton Lynn schemes, how Danton Lynn calls a defense. So I think for that to obviously him to step in was important, but really was crucial. But I think just really kind of everyone is kind of how I look at just the collective picture. So that's why I was really impressed with just that second half defense, despite kind of how they kind of got tricked out of the gate in the first half, and then just kind of struggled to find their rhythm until later on in the game.
I want to explore Danton Lynn a little more, but Gixxer's, we always answer Gixxer Squid's questions. Matt, does the success of USC change this year given the expanded playoff system, i.e. are we successful and we're in the top 12? Well, Gixxer, so this is a tiered, layered conversation. Obviously, USC, the standard is to compete for championships, what Pete Carroll did, basically. But like the floor is supposed to be the top 12. With 12 teams in the playoff instead of 4, USC should be regularly getting into the playoff. So that's the marker there. And so, we'll talk a lot about Oregon on Tuesday because that game is basically, USC's season in terms of getting into the playoff. But what I wrote at Trojans Wire, and this goes back to the Iowa conversation, is I now have belief that in 2026, the pieces can really come together for USC. And I was struck, because we're talking about defense, I was struck by something Danton Lynn said this past week. He talked about how it's been a challenge for him to bring along the younger guys on this defense. And that might explain the slow starts to a degree, but coaching is teaching, and it's not an automatic thing. You can't just saying words, every coach is saying the same words. That doesn't mean you're going to get the results. There's a specific way of communicating to, relating to each player, and it's a challenge, and it's an organic, evolving thing. And so just because you teach certain concepts on a general level, that doesn't mean the players are going to instantly grasp it. You have to, it's like a Rubik's Cube. You have to keep working it, get the right alignment, get the right focus. And it's been a challenge for Danton Lynn. But, when we see how resilient and how coachable these players have been in November, it really feels like this applies to just about any team sport. They're not quite there, but you see that late season growth and development, and it does suggest the following season is going to be when everything comes together, the light goes on, there will be kind of an instant recognition, in early September. It's not going to take 2.5 months for guys to grasp concepts. This feels like that late season evolution that makes me excited, not so much for now, but that's what we'll talk about Tuesday with Oregon. It makes me really excited for 2026 that, maybe this really can come together. I think that Iowa was a big step forward for Danton Lynn. Ethan, your perspective on this, and then Crash.
Yeah, I think, what Danton Lynn said is accurate. I think, we've been really hard on the defense this year because of its youth. And I think that, we've been really hard on the defense this year despite its youth. And I think that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that, at USC we have standards, and that's, you can't talk fans out of their standards, obviously. And you can't talk, especially USC people, and, if our youth is still, I think, on defense is still a failure on some levels, I think that there's some positions that we should have recruited a little bit more heavily in the transfer portal. I've talked about this a little bit here and there in my articles at Trojans Wire. I really think that we should have really hammered the portal, looking for another veteran corner and probably another linebacker that had a little bit more experience under their belts. But obviously the trade-off now is that, some of these young players have now played a full season and they're getting better. And that upward trajectory, like you said, makes you really excited for next season. So, you're almost – I don't really know if USC is sacrificing any games this year. I don't know if, one veteran defensive player makes the difference between USC beating Notre Dame. And I don't know if it'll make the difference between, beating Oregon next week, but like it definitely would have made a difference against Illinois. So you're like, you're maybe sacrificing that one game there. In the end, we could look back at that as like, oh, well, that may have cost us because, if USC wins that game, I think that it's realistic to say that they make the college football playoff, even if they lose to Oregon next week. So, you're making that sacrifice there and it really hurts, but maybe in the long run, it's what, helps benefit the growth of this program. Because another thing that I've talked about over and over at Trojans Wire is that, us being competitive in 2026 is not just about this great recruiting class coming in and playing all the starting positions. Like we need to go out in the transfer portal and do a little bit better than we did this year, or at least have a little bit better luck. But also we need to develop and retain this current roster because there's a lot of talent already on this current roster. Like Desmond Stevens is a talented guy. He's had his frustrating moments this year, but when he's on, he's really impressive. And it's the same thing with Marcellus Williams. Like Marcellus Williams went out against Nebraska and played a real impressive game. And it was really exciting to see that from him. We obviously saw what Kennedy Urlacher did in this game. Like, Jakeem Stewart has been real solid all season. He got an interception in this game. Like, there's a lot of fun talent all over this roster, and they're inconsistent. But, Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane were inconsistent last year. Like, if you retain guys who show flashes and you invest in their development and, all that stuff, then you can really start to see the rewards of that next year. And I think those are the players like the Walker Lyons of the world, the Desmond Stevens of the world, the Marcellus Williams of the world. Those are the guys who are going to make a difference next year when we have to deal with the losses of guys such as Lake McCree and DeCarlos Nicholson and guys like that. So, you can't predict injury stuff too. Like, I mentioned that USC, I think, should have gotten another corner. Like you can't predict Prophet Brown having to this point what's been a season-ending injury. We can't know what his impact would have been through these first few games, or these first several games rather. But I do think that, the benefits that we're seeing are these younger players getting a lot of playing time. And even with some of the injuries too, like King Miller getting a lot of playing time, like this roster should be deep next year, not just because of the recruiting work that we've done, but because of, all the young players that have gotten a shot this year. So that could be to our benefit for sure.
Well, I think Lynn's absolutely right with what he said this week. And I think it really comes down to like, yeah, you think about, oh, you can go get this guy who's proven himself in the portal for the quick fix. But then oftentimes he might be gone after 1 year, especially if he is kind of that senior grad transfer who is maybe just making like an impact for 1 year before going off to the NFL. Whereas if, you recruit guys, you develop them, yeah, maybe there's times there's those growing pains. But if you stick with it, you stay patient as a coaching staff, which, I mean, is hard to do in these days, given that fans' patience fans have way less patience than they did even like when I started college in 2021. Like, I think Helton was kind of like, yeah, like, I mean, I just think about just in general, like fans were a bit more patient 4 years ago than they are now. Like, it's like you got 2, maybe 3 years, or we want you gone. We will turn on you as a fan base, as a coach. So I think coaches kind of feel that pressure to be like, all right, yeah, you got these high-priced transfers. Yeah, they'll be here for 1 year, so we'll figure out we'll do it again. But I think there is something certain about, developing these guys. Yeah, we've been seeing the growing pains. Obviously, the injuries can certainly factor and throw a wrench into everything. And that's just part of football. Injuries happen. So it's like, yeah, that's also frustrating. But fans, I mean, I want to say that fans would care about players' health, and I hope they do. But at the same time, that doesn't really change the fans' lack of patience these days. But when you do recruit guys, you develop them, it's like the results can pay off if you stay with it. I think the best example last year that I can recall was Elijah Page at left tackle. Starting as a redshirt freshman, he struggled at times. Like, there were times like people like 72, get him out of there. Like, get someone who actually knows what they're doing. Sure, maybe that did have to do something with the coaching of Josh Henson at first, but credit to Henson and the rest of the coaching staff, Riley included, they stuck with Page, and he got better throughout the year. And look where he is now. Like, he's doing a lot better. And obviously, I think Zach Hansen taking over that position group has been, I think, helped enhance everyone's development on the O-line. But in general, going back to Page and just the idea of recruiting a guy and developing him, and suffering through some of those growing pains, yeah, maybe you lose a game or two. But in general, I think for the long-term health of the program, especially if you can keep that guy from leaving, I think it helps the program for the long term. So I think with USC, this recruiting class coming in, I think they're trying to build more towards, especially towards having a more sustainable product where it's more, you have a couple fixes you do transfer portal, but you're not just trying to get every high price transfer who's going to help you win this year, but then it's gone next year.
Well, and of course, that is like the ultimate puzzle, that how do you strike the balance of making sure you have enough veteran talent to get to the playoff, and yet you're able to develop your younger guys, your underclassmen, so that they're next up in the rotation. Like Nick Saban was the master of that at Alabama, balancing the frontline talent and yet getting the next man up next season to develop during the year, and then of course into spring ball in the off season. He was able to do that juggling act. USC getting closer, and of course now we turn to Oregon on Tuesday night, 10 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in the West. So it's our biggest show of the year because it's USC's biggest game since the 2022 Pac-12 championship game against Utah. So really big show. And, I do not endlessly promote or advertise for Trojans Wire. We've been doing it, the past few weeks a little bit, but like if there's 1 week, 1 7-day period to read Trojans Wire, it's this week because it's big game week at USC. And lots of games are important. Illinois was important. Michigan was important. Notre Dame was important. Iowa was important. But like this is the big one. This is for all the Tostitos. All right. This is for all the marbles. It's for all the enchiladas, burritos, whatever you prefer on your dinner plate. So do read Trojans Wire this week. I don't promote the site 52 weeks a year, but this is a week to read Trojans Wire. And Ethan, you and I had devised a schedule where like one of us would cover basketball and one of us would do the show. I'm not covering USC basketball on this Tuesday night because it's the Oregon game and it's a huge game. So basketball can kind of go behind the scenes for at least one Tuesday. The three of us will all be here Tuesday night, Oregon week. You can just kind of feel the intensity. You can feel the hate. You can feel the excitement for the upcoming game against the Ducks. So Tuesday, 7 p.m. in LA and the rest of the West, Ethan Inman and Crashlet Collier will join me, Matt Zemek, for our big USC Oregon preview show. Be there. Until then, for Ethan and Crash, this is Matt. Thanks for watching and thanks for supporting the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. Fight on. We will see you Tuesday for a very big show.